Okay, so the title of my talk is Tips for Agentic Development, which is basically tips for using AI coding assistants. Who here is currently using some sort of AI coding assistant in their work? Lots of people. Anyone never used one? So, mostly, is anyone using it for everything they do, pretty much? Okay. So some of this may seem obvious to you if you've got some experience, but there's quite a few tips. I'll try and pack it in, and hopefully there'll be something useful in there for everyone. So AI coding assistants. Hopefully by now you've got some idea of what they are. They're tools or agents that help you as a developer to generate code, to find bugs, to write documentation. They kind of act like a really powerful pair programmer. They also kind of act a little bit like a junior developer at times, which can be a bit frustrating. But they're really good at doing the busy work that helps you as a software engineer do what you're good at, which is solving the problems, taking the customer's requirements and turning that into a software solution. And they can really help you do that more effectively. There are loads of them. It's a thing of logos of all the different. I use Cursor quite a lot. Obviously, Gemini and VS Code. You can run plugins like Klein. I'm sure you're familiar with all the different things there are. So they're a really helpful pair programmer that's got your back to do all the sort of busy work for you. But you've really got to know how to harness their power so that they don't go rogue and become a disaster and cause you more work than they have. So what are the tips? Tip number one is to be specific. So if you think back to high school IT, where you talked about a system being inputs and processes and outputs, I find that's really helpful to think about when writing a prompt. What are my inputs? What do I want the process to be, and what do I want to get out of it? So here's a prompt that's write a function to calculate the area of a circle. Give me a thumbs up if you think it's a good prompt, thumbs down if you think it's a bad prompt. What do we think? Good prompt, bad prompt? Yeah, I reckon this is a bad prompt. Well, it could be better. So, if we think about inputs, process, and outputs, we could modify it a bit. We could say write a PHP function. Okay, so we're specifying what language we're in. Called calculate area, so we're giving it a preference for how it should be named. That takes a radius, that's an input, and returns the area of a circle, that's the process and the output. What do we think about that? Is that good or bad? Good or bad? Ooh, hey, I think that's a lot better. Certainly, it's improved on our first step. What about we do that same prompt and then add on the end, make sure it has documentation and tests. What are we doing? Good, bad. I've gone really cringy heart sign because that's then you're really starting to harness some of the power of it. You're not just saying write me a function, but write me a function with documentation and tests. That crucially means that function is going to be written in a way which is testable and documentable as well. So it's just taking it that step further. So when you think about writing a prompt, it's really useful to think about the role that the agent should be taking on and then the task you're asking it to do. And by role, thinking, if you're doing a sort of weekend hack project where you're trying to put something together really quickly, the decisions you make as a coder are quite different from what you might do in your day job where you're working on an enterprise system that has millions of users. You make different decisions about how you do things. And an AI agent is just the same. So a really good thing that I always do is I say, act as a staff engineer. So I'm a staff engineer, act like me. Think about what are the maintenance implications, what are the performance implications, backward compatibility, that sort of stuff. So here I say, act as a staff engineer, that's the role, and then the task, refactor this function to improve performance, testability, readability. Another thing you do is give context and examples. So here I'm doing some debugging, and I'm telling the agent, when I run whatever command with the test flag, I receive this error message, and paste in the error message, give it the whole lot. And so if I run it without that, it works fine. So that's giving it some context, saying, if this works, that doesn't. here's the error message, and you're giving it things it can do to help solve your problem for you. And then constraints are another really important factor. So here's an imaginary scenario where we've got scores of whatever, I don't know, showing on a web page. They're consuming, the front end's consuming an API endpoint. And our scores are showing as 0 to 1 values instead of percentages. So then the important constraint giving it here is saying we cannot modify the API endpoint. So even if you're in a mono repo where the agent might have access to the back end to modify it, say no, you might have a contract in place, there might be other consumers of that API where you don't want to change that behavior. So just putting that constraint in helps the agent to know what you want and where to work, and it helps you have better results. And this other one, according to corporate policy, every file we change must have an update to its test file. Check to make sure we're complying and update tests if necessary. That's one I use all the time. We've got a crusty repo at work which has a policy in CI/CD which will reject any pull request unless the test files are changed at the same time as the code files. So that really helps me out with that. Tip 2, iterate and refine. You don't need to accept the first answer that an agent gives you. Treat it like a conversation, not like a command. So you can ask follow-up questions, which is sometimes really powerful. And you can ask the AI to refine its code if you don't like what it's done. One really useful thing is to use the planning mode. Most agents have a planning mode that you can ask it to plan what it's going to do. You can then review it and iterate on it before it actually starts writing any code. And the nice way to get into planning mode is just to use the word plan in your prompt, and that usually switches the mode. So here I'd like to add rate limiting to the API, whatever that API may be, with configurable rates per endpoint. Plan some ways that could be done and show me the options so I can choose. And then what the agent will do is say, okay, I could do it this way, I could do it that way, which would you like? And it helps you just get to more predictable results. And also it may open up some options you hadn't thought of by showing you the different options available. Tip 3, let it do the donkey work. The agents are really, really good at taking the boring stuff out of your day job. Generating boilerplate is a great one. Whenever I start a new project, I'll do something like this. Plan a full stack project, Symfony 7, React 18. It must be use Docker Compose for local development and provide a step-by-step structure, necessary Docker files, and an outline for DigitalOcean deployment. And it will beaver away and give you an entire starting point exactly to your specifications, ready to start coding up your project. Much more powerful than an off-the-shelf boilerplate or just spinning up a default Laravel or whatever, because it's completely customized with whatever technologies you want to use. It's great at understanding and debugging complex code bases. If you inherit something that you don't really know how it works, you're seeing an error on the page, just throw the URL of the page at your agent and say, which file is responsible for rendering this page? And it can then look up the routing, match all the routing, follow the code path. Basically what you would do yourself, but as humans we can hold maybe 5, 6 things in our mind as we go until you forget how where you were and how you got there. An agent will do it in 5, 6 seconds and just give you, say, here, this is where that error is occurring. This is one that I used recently. It was in a mono repo, so I had the back end and the front end all within the agent's scope. So I could say the database query for this endpoint is using a select star. Is the front end using all the fields? And so it was able to go through and look at every consumer of that endpoint, go into their templates, find every bit of data they were outputting, and then come back with a list and refine that query and make it more performant as a result. Sort of thing that if you did try to do that by hand, you'd be really unsure if you'd got everything. So that was kind of handy. Writing documentation is another great one. Docs for this project are in /docs. Create a new doc for this change, whatever we've just been working on, and add a note to the quick start guide and any setup changes required. Agents are really, really good at describing the work that you've just done, much better than you are, usually. Particularly this last one, I use this day in, day out. Write a commit message and PR description for these changes. I don't know about you, but I hate writing pull request descriptions. It's got to go to someone for review. They've got to understand what you did. The agent knows exactly what you've done. It can just write it out for you, copy and paste it in, away you go. If you're feeling ambitious, you can actually have an agent use the GitHub API and create the PR for you, but might be a step too far in my tests. Which brings us nicely on to step 4. Don't trust, verify. Ultimately, you're responsible for the code that an agent produces. So it's really important that you review it yourself and that you verify that it's doing what you thought it was doing and it is trustworthy. So you still need tests, even though it's been written by even though the code's been written by a computer. You still need tests. So get it to generate the tests for you. Check those tests are testing something sensible, and then carry on. And you've got to check security. You can't be sure that just because it's been written by a computer, it's secure. You still might need to, scan with sneak test or whatever to make sure there are no security flaws in there. So don't trust things, verify. And tip 5, stay in charge. You're the boss. This is something I do sometimes. If you're asking the agent to work on a big change that would have multiple steps, I will often say, break this task down into logical steps. Between each step, I'd like to review the code and make a commit, so the commit history is progressive and easily understandable. After each step, provide a suggested git commit message, and then wait for me to verify before you proceed to the next step. And so that'll break it up into logical steps. You can review what it's done, commit it, say, okay, I'm ready, goes on to the next, and then it's basically just supercharging your workflow, but it's not doing this thing where it will go off, make changes in 25 files that you're then going to commit all at once, which you would never do in real life because it's not an understandable change. So you're the boss, tell it how you want to work, and it will do what you want. It won't be offended, which is nice. And my last tip is context is king. As you're working with an agent, it's building up context about your project. It's building context about the problem that you're solving, how you want to work, and it's storing all that and using all that context to make its to sort of inform its decisions going forward. That context is really, really hard earned and quite, it's expensive to earn because every operation where the agent is doing stuff, it's spending money and spending time, and it's really easily lost. If your agent crashes or you need to restart, or you can lose that context quite easily, and then you're back to square one. Something that isn't in here, which is a really handy thing that I worked out I could do just this afternoon, is I had lost a load of context. I went back to the agent, I said, look at the last 3 Git commits and work out where we are. And it went back and read its own commit messages and then got back up to speed, looked at the files that had changed, and that worked really well. But you don't always get that lucky. So a really nice way to deal with this is an agent's MD file. Has anyone used an agent's MD file? Yeah, a couple of people. So this is basically like a README file, but it's for your agents. And it's supported by lots of the major manufacturers. The different companies support it. And it's an MD file, a markdown file. You can read it in plain English, but it stores information about the context of your project. So it might have an overview of your project, just how it works, build and test commands. You can have coding style guidelines in there. And if any particular security considerations you might have, you can document in there. You can put in there, always act as a staff engineer, or always run linting tools after making a change. You can have instructions about how you want to form your commit messages or your pull requests, how the project is deployed. Basically, anything you might tell to a teammate as you're onboarding them onto a project, you can just write in there. And if you've got a large mono repo, you can have multiple agent files. So you can have one for your front end, one for your API, one for your database migrations, whatever. You can break it down and have different things like that. So how do you create one? Well, it's really easy. You say to your agent, create an agents.md file for this project with everything you know, and it'll just create it. You don't have to understand how the format works. Just let it do it for yourself. And my favorite tip for this is add a note to agents.md file, So it should be kept up to date with any changes to the project. And so the agent is each time is reading that, and if it decides something has changed about the project, it'll become self-documenting as it goes. You can find out about the agents.md file at agents.md, which is a pretty cool domain. So those were the tips. Thanks very much. My slides are on that QR code if you need them. Cheers.